right, good evening. I am going to call the August 11th Licensing Hearings and Public Safety meeting to order. We will do roll call. Alder Lefebvre. Here. Alder Boris. Here. Alder Perella. Here. Alder Heidemann. Here. Alder Rust is present. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alrighty, I am looking for approval of the minutes from the July 29th meeting. Move to approve. All in favor of approving those minutes, state aye. Aye. Chair votes aye, those are approved. Anybody for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 6, General Ordinance number 13-25-26 by Alderpersons Rust and Lefebvre, amending section 52-109 of the Sheboygan Municipal Code with regard to 24-hour parking. Attorney Majerus.
Thank you. This ordinance was requested by the police department to support their parking enforcement measures, to add clarity so that drivers understand what's expected of them, and to add clarity to the court when they are reviewing citations that are being challenged.
All right, any questions? Alder Boris.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will admit that I did not know that this was a ordinance until I received the agenda. Particularly because I've never seen enforcement of it, and I was curious, first, what are the ramifications of violation of this ordinance?
So this is a simple parking ticket. I don't know offhand what the forfeiture is. I want to say it's like $10. It's not a very big parking ticket. When you receive more than, if you start adding them up, or if you are delinquent in paying, it can get expensive.
What level of enforcement or how many tickets are issued on a monthly basis for this purpose?
I don't have an answer to that question. I can tell you that in the years I've prosecuted for the city, I have seen these citations come through regularly every year, but I can't tell you how many.
Are there any exceptions to this rule throughout the city for any purpose, specifically residential?
I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I don't know if there are areas of the community where you can park longer than 24 hours at a time. I know that if you call the police department because you anticipate needing to exceed the parking limits, if you give them that advance notice, they will honor that and not issue enforcement. There are legal defenses available to drivers, but that would be something that they would need to work through with their private attorneys.
Is there any mechanism within the code, any information shared within the code that would advise a citizen to reach out to the police department in advance?
Off the top of my head, what comes to mind relates to trailer parking. And I believe that there is something in the code, but also on the police department webpage. I don't know about specific to the 24-hour ordinance.
Again, I was surprised specifically about this requirement. I wasn't aware of it prior, and I can think of so many instances where parking a vehicle for 24 continuous hours would be necessary. Birth of a new baby, visitors in town, everybody's going camping together, so many instances. So I was very surprised to see this, and while I understand the additional language that's being added here so that it can be enforced and understood, I guess, more clearly, I'm just wondering if there are other options that we maybe should be exploring, like having a street parking pass that the city sells or something like that, which would generate revenue, but also prevent parking violations that are potentially completely out of individual's control. So
when an individual is issued a parking citation, they have an opportunity to challenge that, and they can first submit the citation to administrative review with the police department. After that, it goes to the city attorney's office for review at that point. They also have the option to challenge the case to a municipal court trial, and the judge can decide whether the citation should be dismissed in the interest of justice or because of a defense that's raised by the driver. I would offer that for the discussion on the agenda today, it is specific to adding clarifying language. And if any member of the council was interested in exploring our general parking regulations or permit opportunities and the like, that would be beyond the scope of this item, but we could have that discussion.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you,
Alder
Chair.
Perella.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the questions were answered already, and I just wanted to add that, yes, I think that it would be worth it to readdress separately. Although I also want to add this also ties into the winter parking rules, where also people are asked to move from one side to the other. So that would be a time in which this same ordinance applies. I mean, that is ties into that. But I would be personally interested in understanding the police department's feedback on how important to them. So the scope, how important is the scope of the ordinance? But besides that, I have to add that the amendment of today just made me chuckle. I mean, it's really, I understand why it is asked for. Thank you.
Would the police, yeah. All right. Assistant Chief?
Good evening, thank you. This change in the ordinance was asked for a very, very simple reason, and that was to clarify what parking in a different spot means. It's that simple. So we had contact with a citizen earlier this year where there was an alleged violation by somebody else in the community that the trailer had been parked there all summer long, right? And so, and I wasn't able to review the ordinance. There are exceptions in the ordinance. I think you're allowed up to 10 waivers a year, so it is actually quite generous if you actually follow the process. You can get an exemption for overnight parking, for trailer parking, but what you can't do is leave a trailer in the same location as it was the day before, regardless of whether you hook it, unhook it, it has to move. And so the addition to the ordinance was really to clarify what does moving to a different spot mean. It's really just that simple. And the citizen who pointed it out, he was right? What does that actually mean? Do I have to completely be in a different spot? If I move in inches, that enough? And so this just supplies a measurement so that both sides can understand what an actual violation looks like.
So yes, thank you for that. That is clear, and that's the part that I was, absolutely, I am in agreement with. It makes complete sense to me as far as the adjustment. But what I was asking is more about the scope of the general ordinance as far as how important is, for safety reason, the ordinance itself, right? So we ask people to move their car, and I do, in my district, for example, that is something, and I don't want to derail too much, but it's something that is a lived experience, daily lived experience, because many of my constituents do not have access to a garage. And so that is a thing that I have been addressing with some of my constituents quite a bit, and I'm interested in learning why this ordinance is important why it is important for safety reason for the police department to have vehicles moved every 24 hours. That is more, besides cleaning the streets and winter parking.
Yeah, and I think that's part of a larger conversation. I'm certainly willing to share some information with about that. Alderwoman Boris, you asked about the enforcement of the ordinance. We enforce that ordinance every day. We have community service officers as well as officers from the patrol division that are responding to complaints from citizens about these issues. It is important to be consistent with the enforcement because when we're not, citizens get frustrated by it because they've had it enforced against them, and then their neighbors are doing the same thing and nothing is being done about it. So it is important to stay consistent with the enforcement, as well as why is it important? A lot of people own recreational boats, trailers, RVs. If they were allowed to remain for extended periods of time on all of the city streets, there would be no place for our residents to park, or it would seriously diminish our ability for people in residential neighborhoods. You could have somebody say, what if they had a boat and a camper and multiple vehicles? If they have a camper, maybe they have a large pickup truck, maybe a fifth wheel. I mean, you could literally take up a whole city block in parking. And so it's really about what's the best use of the city streets for the people who live here, and that's to support their daily life. And unfortunately, that means that we maybe can't also support their recreational life in the same way, and that's why you see parking lots full of campers at storage facilities around the county.
Yeah, the only thing is that I understand completely the idea, especially of the RVs and recreational vehicles in general, although this ordinance applies to any vehicle. So maybe we can have a larger conversation in future and address it. For example, maybe there is a possibility of distinguishing. I'm just thinking loud, right? Making a separation between a recreational vehicle, the trailer, the RV, the pop-up, etc., and regular vehicles. I'm just, again, I'm thinking loud because this ordinance applies to any vehicle, right?
Yes, and so I didn't get that far, and so thanks for reminding me that I should talk about that as well. As far as the 24-hour ordinance relating to vehicles, we have people who operate in our community that scrap used vehicles. It basically would allow them to park the streets full of these and then for them to remain there. A lot of our 24-hour violations are reoccurring violations where we're enforcing them and they're moved to a new location and then our CSOs end up dealing with them again. But really the ordinance is to keep broken down vehicles off the city streets so that those spots can be used by people who, again, supporting their daily life, who need to come and go from home. And so, or you could potentially get somebody who just likes cars, right? And so the normal home can park 2 or 3 cars in their driveway and in their garage. But what if I want to own 6 or 7 cars? But I can't drive 6 or 7 cars every day. And so if I'm going to park the block full, then it's not available for the other people who live in that area.
Thank you.
Alder Heidemann.
Thank you, Chair. I understand about, last thing I want to have is somebody park their car in front of my house and it's broken down and I don't know when they're going to remove it. Is there a waiver or something if you have a mechanical problem with a vehicle that you can notify the police department and say, listen, that I can't get that car into a repair shop for 2 days. It's going to be there. They're going to come and pick it up. Is there a way that guy can communicate to the police department that he doesn't want to be ticketed because it's there longer than 24 hours?
Yeah, we keep a log in our dispatch center. They just need to call into the dispatch center and say, I'm having a problem with my vehicle. It needs to remain there overnight. And we're usually pretty generous with that.
Okay, thank you.
Alder Boris.
A question about enforcement. With this added language, how is the CSO supposed to be certain whether or not that vehicle has moved the 10 feet required? Are they chalking wheels? Like, what are they doing to determine that amount of movement has occurred? And it's not somebody who, say, works a night shift and parks on the street in the exact same spot every day, and to the casual observer who's there during the daytime, it's been there the entire time.
Yeah, so I mean, we have investigative means for determining whether or not a vehicle has been moved or not. Neighborhoods have cameras. We do chalk tires.
Okay. All right. I'll be in touch about my neighborhood. We've got both of the things that you mentioned. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
All right, any other questions? Not seeing any? I'm looking for a motion. All in favor? Chair votes aye. That is approved. Item number 7, report 10-25-26 by city clerk submitting various license applications. Attorney Majerus,
I'm available for questions.
is there any questions? Seeing none, I am looking for a motion. All in favor? Chair votes aye, that is approved. Item number 8, presentation, Sheboygan County Public Safety Complex Study Progress Update by Wendell/5 Bugles Design. Chief?
Thank you, Chair. So with me tonight is, as you mentioned, Wendell 5 Bugle. I have Laura and Robbie, who will introduce and talk a little bit about themselves and then go over the presentation regarding the public safety complex.
Thanks, Chief. Click the button on this. There we go. All right, good evening. Just little introductions on ourselves, first of all, and who we are personally. My name is Robbie Krzyzanowski. I'm the Director of Emergency Services for Wendell and 5 Bugles Design. I've been with 5 Bugles brand now, and when you kind of think about 5 Bugles, it's kind of like a Pepsi or a Coke, right? It's a part of Wendell. Wendell's ultimately the architecture firm that's working for you. It's contracted for you, but we have this niche service called 5 Bugles Design. I've been with that service now for about 15 years since its inception. That's all Laura and I do is emergency services facilities across the entire country. So it's a little niche that we've been doing, and it's ended up being a great little service that we offer here. And the good news is we're fairly close. Myself, I live in Thorpe, Wisconsin. Laura's out of Eau Claire. We're both out of the Eau Claire, Wisconsin office. And that's a little bit about myself. I'm gonna let Laura do a little introduction on herself, and then we'll talk about the companies a little more. You don't have nothing else to say?
No, so my name's Laura Eisnagel. I'm an architect with the Wendell 5 Bugles Company. As Robbie said, all I do is emergency services facilities. I'm really excited to be here. We've been working with Chief for a little over a year now, so I'm excited to show you what we've been working on.
You'll find that we don't like to talk about ourselves very much, so we'll go into the companies a little bit. Again, Wendell is the overall company that we are working for. You can see we have 16 offices throughout the entire country. We are a multidiscipline firm, so we have the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, architectural, all those services in-house. We sub out kind of the locality stuff, so like civil, we'll work with local firms to do that. We have a favorite structural engineer that we all use, but really an in-house service that we all provide with all of our design that we have. And again, we got 300 plus employees. Laura and myself are both owners within the company, so we have about 60 or so owners within that company. We have 4 owners total out of the Eau Claire office. Underneath that, again, the 5 Bugles niche, you can kind of see where it's at. We've kind of built this up over the last 20 years, myself and 2 other partners. Worked on a lot of emergency services. We then split apart from another firm and formed this group about 15 to 16 years ago. Again, dedicated in this. We do the smaller ones and the larger ones all across the entire country. We do bring a lot of national credibility in regards to judging. Myself and Laura are both were judges for Firehouse Magazine, essentially a publication that puts out all the best fire stations every year. And Laura and myself were both judges in that category. So we get to see a lot of what's happening across the entire country, not just in the Midwest. So different ideas that we're bringing in, is helpful what other people are doing across the country and bringing that to the table here. So a great thing. And then again, just sponsors of different presenters at just different state organizations with Wisconsin State Fire Chiefs or any other local organizations that we're sponsorships for, but also teaching and how to go about this process is something we do. I'm going to turn it over to Laura because, she didn't have much to say about herself, but this is her project really in the end. She's going to kind of go through a little bit of a presentation on where we were and where we are heading ultimately, and then we'll have discussion points after that. So take it over, Laura.
Excellent. So this is our outline that we're going to go over tonight. So essentially, we're going to just start with how we got to where we are. Talk about existing conditions, both for Station 3 and Station 2. Talk about programming or space needs analysis, what goes into the building. Talk about our concept plans, and then also what comes next. So essentially, this project's been going on for quite a long time, and actually, it's been going on since before we came on board. So back in 2019, there was a study of existing Station 3. Throughout COVID kind of extended that process, but from that study, it was determined that Station 3 really needed to be raised, or not raised, but necessarily just moved on from. We should get a different facility for Station 3. So we went through the process of trying to acquire the new facility, and throughout 2020 through to 2024 was that process. Sorry, I was not a part of this process. I can talk a lot better on this slide. So last summer we came and we did the kickoff for Station 3, and we did all of the programming. We'll talk a bit about programming next. We tried to figure out what goes into it, and we started that concept process. Partially through that, we started to examine the physical conditions of Station 2 to figure out what is actually going on in that facility, what improvements should be made, how can we make the station state-of-the-art complex. We started talking then about a training complex at Station 3. We started looking at the police department expansion to see how we can help that department. We started doing tours, so we took them to different facilities that we have designed and constructed here in Wisconsin to see what the latest and greatest stations are doing. Are you interested in that? How does this compare? And then since then, we've been working through the report. So that's where we are today. So essentially, existing conditions. As we've said several times now, all we do is fire stations. So when we go into these public safety facilities, when we go into these facilities, there are a couple of things that we always do for every single client. So this is our list. So we walk through the facilities to see what we see, kind of take a look to see what's going on. We review the floor plans. We talk to our staff. And then we start thinking, like after we do that, we start really diving in. We start looking at, does it meet code? If we were to renovate it, what would we have to do to make it meet code? Does it meet ADA compliance? Does it meet NFPA, so National Fire Protection Association? Does it meet their guidelines for the fire station, specifically for NFPA? Does it meet the needs of a contemporary and future fire departments? Once we've kind of determined all of those things, we start looking at the actual structure itself. Can it be renovated? If it is renovated, how does this work? Our emergency services departments are 24/7 operations, so how do we move them to a different place to maintain service for your community while also figuring out how to renovate the facility? What are the cost differences between the two? What are your pros and cons? So we really start diving into all of those different things when we're doing this existing conditions assessment. Some common things that we see in a lot of fire departments, and again, these are not necessarily all for your department, but specifically when we're looking at these facilities, these are things we see a lot. They're often undersized. The majority of fire stations today were built well before the DOT, the Department of Transportation, established maximum roadway and bridge sizes. And so since that time, apparatus have grown to be as big as physically possible. So our buildings literally don't fit the old stations or the old apparatus. Our apparatus doors are often too small. They don't have personal decontamination. So again, a long time ago, we didn't know what our responders were being exposed to, so we didn't understand how we need to clean them off when they get back. There was no proper gear storage. Where do they put their gear? Where do they store that? It wasn't designed for multiple genders. There was only men in the fire industry, so now we have more than one gender coming into the space. We need to make sure we can accommodate that. A lot of times we don't have dorms, or we do have dorms, but they were made from a large bunk room into individual dorms, and they don't meet code. Lack of visual and audible privacy. This one comes into effect a lot, especially at your Station 2. But specifically offices and dorms, you don't have privacy, or typically we don't see privacy in toilet and shower rooms. Often there are no exercise areas, and often they do not meet ADA compliance. So those are just typical things that we see on a regular basis. So specifically to Station 3, again, we didn't study Station 3, so I don't know this facility quite as well as I do Station 2. But currently it holds your administration, your Station 3 duty crew, and a training tower. The training tower is actually from the 1950s, and it's no longer structurally sound, so that's definitely a concern. It needs to be replaced. All needs would have to be replaced in Station 3, so because we would actually want to remove that entire facility, everybody from that facility, when we do its replacement, it can't just be admin, or it can't just be the duty crew. Everybody should be relocated and stay together. And our support bays would also have to come with us. So we have a lot of needs at this particular station that we have to house, and they all have to move with us. We have to keep it together as one. So Station 2, we're gonna dive into this one quite a bit more. So it was built in 1978 and 79, and that's right about the time that the DOT established that roadway sign. So there were a couple things specific about your facility on the outside. First of all, we had to have a major, there was an emergency roof repair done in about 2020. The roof for the apparatus bay was quite literally caving in, so that has been redone. It's landlocked by a city block, so you can see the yellow outline there is our actual site. We have roadways on the west and the south. There's parking on the north and residential areas on the east sides. It's about 6,300 square feet above grade, and then you do have a partial basement in this facility. So what we see when we very first walk in is it simply does not meet the current code. So if we were to renovate this facility, we would have to make sure that it meets current code. It does not meet ADA compliance. It does not meet NFPA recommendation for contemporary fire stations in terms of health and safety for our responders. Actually quite a few of the interior and exterior finishes have met their useful life cycle. Being that it's over 45 years old, that's pretty typical. Not too surprised by that, but it is fairly undersized for what we're looking for too. So specifically, here's a couple images of your facility. You can see the asphalt is in rather poor condition and would have to be replaced. We have a lot of settlement on this site, and what that's causing are these lips and sidewalks and in apparatus bays, and it's a trip hazard, and it's just not safe for our responders. ADA compliance issues, there's no ADA parking, and even just getting to and from the facility is quite difficult. And one more thing about the settlement, you can see in the photo in the lower left-hand corner, the sidewalk is literally pulling away from the facility, which is causing water damage to go down into the basement. So you have a lot of water and water challenges on this property. Going to the exterior then, there are just some deferred maintenance items. Again, it's from 78. This is not that surprising. We would have to do some tuck pointing, replacing caulks and seals. But more specifically, our doors do not meet current ADA compliance, both with the thresholds, the approach, how you get to the door, how you pull the door back, the hardware on it. The windows are near the end life cycle, so if we did do anything with this facility, we would definitely recommend replacing them. And our overhead doors are showing signs of racking or sagging, denting, and all the glazing and the seals are broken. Glazing and the seals broken in the glazing doesn't seem like a big issue, but when it is the only issue or the only window that you can see out when you are responding to a call, that is a major safety concern that we'd want to be aware of. So when we move inside the facility, again, these are pretty common things, but for your facility, we don't have a personal decontamination area. All of our gears you can see on that lower left-hand photo is stored right on the apparatus bay. Today in contemporary fire stations, we try to get our responders clean and get their gear clean, and then once it is clean, keep it off the apparatus bay floors. We don't have a transition zone between the apparatus bay and the living quarters, and we don't have any gear laundry at this particular location. The dorms do not meet code. Again, just like I mentioned earlier, this was a larger bunk room. I think it was during COVID. We went in and kind of added some partition walls. They don't meet code. The door hardware doesn't meet code. The doors themselves don't meet code. We'd really want to make sure that that was fixed. There's a basement in this facility, and unfortunately, the basement isn't tall enough to meet the ceiling heights that are required by the IBC, by code. There's poor acoustic control throughout the entire facility, so there's no private spaces where conversations can be had that need to stay private. And again, I mentioned the structure of the apparatus bays, but specifically to the rest of the facility, it doesn't meet what we would have to do for current structural requirements for the loads. Emergency services facilities are actually kept to a higher standard than a typical building, let's say, I don't know, a house or a supermarket. They're set at much higher code levels, much higher wind loads, and it doesn't meet it. So if we did bring this, renovate this facility, we'd have to make sure that we brought that up to code. So essentially, what's going on now is that the facility is under, oops, this is police, just kidding. So in the police area then, moving on to the police department, the garage space that we have is currently undersized. We do have some fleet storage in there, but that spot is undersized. Our maintenance storage is undersized, and our evidence storage is undersized. So what that's creating for our police department is that it's a very inefficient way to do business. We have different items like evidence storage and tire storage, and the seats for the police squads are held all over the city in 3 or 4 different locations, which just is incredibly inefficient. And the bad part for the evidence storage is that we also then would have chain of custody concerns, and just making sure that we can keep that in one spot is incredibly important. Currently, the department stores evidence throughout the city. Like I said, chain of custody, it's inefficient for our user experience, and it's also inefficient for monitoring and protecting that evidence. A story that I was told last week was there was somebody who came to claim a bicycle that had been picked up. The officer had to drive all the way across town, pick up the bike, and come all the way back. It took well over an hour for the officer to do all these different things that they had to do, where it could have been 5 minutes if it had just been on site. So those efficiencies are incredibly important when we're talking about emergency services. So space needs analysis, or programming. What is it? So programming is where we go through, we have a document where we go through and we see every single type of space that we have put in an emergency service facility throughout the country, and we talk about them and we say, how do you work as a department? What do you need? So we confirm what you need, we confirm what you would like, and there's definitely a difference between needs and wants, and we try and talk them through. And we really try and think through to the future. Obviously, we don't have crystal balls, but we do our best judgment trying to figure out what we are going to need in the next little bit, 50 years. So for Fire Station 3, this is where we programmed. We programmed at just under 51,000 square feet, and you can see the largest majority of that is actually your apparatus bays. As I mentioned, you have a lot of apparatus needs at this facility, being that it's your headquarters in your central station. So this is right where we would expect it to be for a department of your size. For the dirty classroom and firing range, so we haven't really talked about that yet, but a dirty classroom would be a classroom that our officers, both police, fire, and public works, could come and use to train, and they wouldn't have to go through an entire decontamination process before they did that. We'll talk about the site plan later and how this would all play into one another, but the dirty classroom and firing range would be one unit, so that programmed at about just under 11,000 square feet. Our police department and evidence expansion would have about 11,000 square feet, so we have the evidence expansion, maintenance bays, utilities that come into it, total new construction right around there. The next one is Fire Station 2. So again, these are the different areas. So bays, 3,800 square feet. This is a satellite station, so that gets to be quite a bit smaller. Administration, you'll see, is quite a bit smaller again, because all the admin is primarily at Station 3. So what we do then is we move into conceptual design. And what we're trying to do in conceptual design is we're trying to understand, is it gonna work? Is it gonna function? What things are touching one another? What are our relationships between each area? Do we have the right number of things? Are their sizes gonna work? Does it function? And it's kind of a fit test, just to make sure that it fits. So essentially, what goes on in fire safety, there are three primary issues we have in the fire service that are causing harm to our responders. They are cardiac arrest, cancer, and mental health concerns. So what we try and do as designers for emergency service facilities is we try and figure out what can we put into that facility to try and mitigate and reduce some of these cancer risks, or some of these risks. So for cardiac arrest, making sure our officers are physically fit, making sure we have a fitness room so they can work out and stay strong. Our alerting mechanisms, so if, back in the day, a fire would go off and there'd be a bell and you'd be sleeping, you'd be jolted awake. That causes a lot of harm to your heart, and then you're gonna go to a high-risk scenario that can just cause a lot of pressure. So if we can control how our alerting mechanisms go off, if we can control that, EMS has one tone and fire has another tone, then they don't have to wake up for one another, that would be an amazing thing. Response lighting controls as well, so instead of just flashing on all the lights, let's bring up the lights gradually as you're responding, so that way you're not in that shock. Cancer control is a really big, really serious topic right now for our firefighters. So making sure that we have the hot, or the contaminated zones, and then that cool zone, or non-contaminated areas, and a transition between the two. We call that personal decontamination. We'll talk a little bit about that in a couple minutes here. But with that, we also want to properly pressurize our mechanical systems to make sure that any air or carcinogens that are in the apparatus bay aren't being brought back into our bedrooms, into our sleeping rooms. We want proper gear storage. We want to get it off the apparatus bays, get it clean, keep it clean, stay off the bays. And then the NFPA recommends what they call shower within the hour. And that is trying to get our responders to make sure that once they get back from a call, they can start to doff their gear, if they still have it on, start to wash their PPE, and then they themselves can get into the shower, clean off anything that they might have been exposed to. Last but not least is mental health. And, the thing that we really want to do is understand that our responders are living their lives here. This is not a 9-to-5 job. They are spending a lot of time at these areas, and we want to make sure that they are comfortable. Make them home-like spaces, make sure we provide decompression areas, and also fitness spaces. So exercise is a really good use for a lot of people for their mental health control. So those are the things that we try and mitigate when we start doing our station design. So a couple other things that we try and control is how we get our responders to a call. So what is response time? So when we talk about our response, we talk about, there's a couple different things, but for the facility itself, our turnout time. How long does it take the firefighter to get from their dorm room to their gear, onto the apparatus, and out the door? And then also, how long does it take us to get from the station to the incident itself? So fortunately, you have your stations kind of scattered about, and we already know where your stations are gonna be. So we didn't have to worry about the travel time. The only thing that we can control then in this response time is our turnout time, or how quickly our responders can get safely through the facility to your apparatus bays. Why does it matter? So NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, puts out this standard called 1710, and it dictates how quickly we need to get firefighters on site. So for fire, it's 5 minutes, or it's actually 4 minutes, but they include 1 minute for donning your PPE. So it's 4 minutes 90% of the time, or 4 minutes 90% of the time to everybody in your district. And fire, or EMS, first respond, or basic life, wow, BLS, should also be that 4 minute mark. So it's saying 5 minutes, but again, that's including doffing your PPE. So this next slide then, actually I'm gonna go back. So these little charts here on the right and the left-hand side, on the top, what that shows is how quickly flames can spread. So this is why it's important. So under certain conditions, a fire can double in size every 60 seconds. So the longer we take to get to an incident, the worse off we're gonna be. The same goes for survival risks for CPR. So if anyone has done, or for cardiac arrest, if anyone's taken a CPR class, you've probably seen that chart. Basically what it's saying is that it's exponentially worse the longer someone has to wait. And when you're in an emergency situation, the last thing you wanna do is wait. 1 minute can feel like an hour. So we wanna make sure our responders get there as quickly as possible. What this also says is the turnout time. So this is what I was referencing before. So getting on our gear, the NFPA recommends or says that it should take a responder 80 seconds to be out the door for a fire call and 60 seconds to be out the door for an EMS call. They have different levels of protection that they might be putting on. That's why they get the extra 20 seconds for fire. But essentially, that comes into play too. So keynotes that we want to keep in mind is that when we're looking at this facility, it's not just fire, it's not just police, we're also looking at public works. So it's 3 departments that we are trying to help train in all of these different facilities. All of our people need training per OSHA and or ISO recommendations. All of these departments can use all of these facilities. They can all use the training props. And the best part, in my opinion, is by making some sort of a public safety campus, which you'll see here in just a second, is that we have a cross-contamination between the different departments. So they can train together and they can learn from one another. And the bonus is that way when they are responding together, they've worked together. This is old hat, we've done it before. Needs have changed, and they're gonna continue to change. So we wanna make sure that our designs are meant for today, but they also work for the future. So we have to have a certain amount of flexibility in there and just kind of thinking of how we're gonna change. Efficiencies of training. Again, we're gonna talk about this training campus in just a second here, but essentially in 2021, your department did a live fire training and it cost about $13,000 to do this training. Because of that, we don't get to do it that often. Why does it cost so much? We have to travel. We have to get there, we have to have lodging, we have to have meals, we have to have mileage, and also we have to pay overtime because someone has to be here still protecting your community. So then you're only training part of your group and you have to flip-flop who's training when. So if we can get them all training together on site in your community, it's just safer for your community. And last but not least is your ISO training points. So there are 2 things that we'll talk about when we get to your training live fire tower, is that it's gonna be 4 stories, which is an ISO training, is an ISO point giver. So ISO will give your fire department different ISO levels. The lower the number, the better the department, and you can get more points if you have a 4-story training tower. You can also get more points if you can flow water in the facility. So those are a couple things that we really want to focus on when we started this concept design. So here it is. This is our public safety campus. So you can see the existing police department is already there, located on the north side. What we are proposing is that to the east, on the back of that, would be the police department addition, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. Just to the south of that, then, bridging the gap between police and fire, will be our dirty classroom and firing range for our police and fire departments to train in, and obviously the public works. Just below that, then, is our fire training building. And then to the right of that, or to the east of that, is our fire training props. Those three areas right there are where all three of our departments can train together on a regular basis. To the south of that, then, we have our apparatus support base, and to the east or the west of that is our new Fire Station 3, which is our admin and then duty crew for Station 3. The reason that we have that separate building for the apparatus support base is because, again, we have a lot of needs for apparatus at this facility, and we really wanted to make sure that we had the most efficient use of response. And the station was growing, and we thought, hey, you don't need all of these all 4 seasons. What if we were to put some over here and kind of rotate apparatus through as needed? That's why we have that separate facility. The other unique opportunity that we have here is that we have that water up to the back, so we're actually working with the department to figure out training opportunities with that. So essentially, what we have for our fire station for number 3 is that our public parking would be on the north, and that would be our public entry. We want to keep our visitors away from any response as far as possible. We have our staff parking then off to the northeast-hand corner with our staff entry just to the south of that. We have a response that goes through, those are those red and green arrows. So response goes out to the west, and you can return from the bottom and come back around to the east to drive through the apparatus bays. This facility would house our central supply for our EMS. So that's on the back side there, so other stations can come and refill as needed. And then we have a maintenance bay on the very south side of the property. Essentially then, what we're proposing doing is a 2-story facility. It's about 42,000 square feet. Our key features in this one are a training room, which will also serve as an EOC, or an Emergency Operations Center. Will also be, it's also designed to very easily have people come through for voting. Our police department, the way it's set up right now is where you see the exercise, our police department can actually access that space through the staff door, and they can utilize that exercise space. And then our department has a maintenance bay on the very end there, so where it says bays and then it goes to blue, that last bay, then the last bit of red, that will be the maintenance bay. We'll look at these a little bit more in closed session too. Our public safety campus for the fire training center, so this is our live fire burn center, it will use the parking lot from the Station 3 parking area, so that was sized appropriately. Like I said before, it'll be used by all 3 departments. So fire department can use this, the police department, and the public works department. And then we have space to the back for future training props, such as confined space training and trench claps, which is what the public works department will need for OSHA training. This is what it would look like. This is an example. This is not exactly yours. Yours will be catered a little bit more to your needs, but it is 5 stories. It does provide us to have an opportunity for live fire training, and again, it can be used by all 3 departments. Our dirty classroom and firing range. So this will also utilize that Station 3 parking area. It has an entry on the north for the police department coming directly out of their facility, and then an entry on the south for the fire department. The unique thing about that then is that we'll have that dirty classroom, so when they're in that live fire training, without having to go all the way back through decontamination and doff their PPE and go into a formal classroom, they can go right up here, have immediate conversations, reflect on what just happened, and go back out to that live fire training center. So essentially, this is how this works, where it'll be a single-story slab on grade. There is a mezzanine that will be used for training. Dirty classroom, again, can be used by police, fire, and public works. There is a small decontamination or transition zone for our fire department, and then has the live fire range at the back. Our police department expansion, what we are proposing doing there is adding on to the eastern end of the police department, and that would be a drive-through garage space where we have parking. Then we would also have our additional apparatus, and that's actually coming on the next one, so I can show you that. But we have additional staff parking on the east side of the facility, and then our impound is on the south side. The thing that's nice about where that impound is, it's really truly protected by the overall public safety campus. So essentially, this is a high-level view of what we're looking at. So again, it is a single-story slab on grade. There is a small mezzanine. You have your fleet storage, you have your evidence storages, and you have maintenance storage. So this is where, you know, additional seats and tires and all of that would be stored. And then, like I said, that impound lot to the south there. So Station 2, we did look at a renovation and addition concept, but when it really came down to it, what we thought would be better for the department and be a better use for the taxpayer dollars is to consider doing a new facility. So basically what we would be doing is building a new facility directly to the south. And this, it goes to the east, but that's actually facing south, to be confusing. But what we're trying to do is that we would be able to phase it. So we'd be able to maintain your existing apparatus bays, build your new facility, and then raise your apparatus bays and finish the site for Station 2. So essentially on this one, the red is indicating where our return would be, green would indicate response, our public parking, and our entry space. So again, just like for Station 1, or Station 3, we have 2 stories that would be, it's about 14,000 square feet. So we have our exercise room and our training room and our apparatus support, or our transition zones, all on that first floor with our apparatus bays, and then our living quarters are on the floor up above. This would also be set up, again, for voting. I didn't mention that before, but the way that we have this laid out, and again, when we go into closed session and you can see this in more detail, you can understand how that voting flow will work. So what we are looking at here, these are the programmed versus the concept, and typically our square footages do go down. You will see that you'll see that the dirty classroom did go up, but ironically, that actually, when we programmed that dirty classroom and that firing range originally, it was really big. And then we went really small because it was kind of reaction, and then we met in the middle to make sure that we got to the right spot with that one. So essentially, what's next? So where we are in design is there are 5 phases of design, and we are at phase -1. What we would be proposing is that we would move into schematic design, or the first phase of the design process, which are big picture items. And I'm going to just actually flip to this page. So it's big picture items. We will confirm the size. We'll start adding in windows, walls, and doors. We'll see if there's any efficiencies that we can take in, squeeze down. We'll start understanding the massing. What does this actually look like? How does this actually work together? And we'll start getting a general idea of the system. So how are we heating it? What are our electrical systems looking like? What size generator? Like, what all do we think we need on the generator? Those types of things. At the end of that, then, I'm going to go back to this one. At the end, we do an estimate to make sure that we are on track with where we're supposed to be. We ask for permission to go into the next phase of design, and then hopefully we move into design development. Design development is the details. So we start really starting to look through. So for example, in this room, we would start designing like this front here. How does this, like, what kind of material is that? How does this operate? How does this function? For our fire department specifically, you know, how does your SCBA room work? What do you need in there? What kind of casework do you want? We also start diving into the systems more thoroughly, and we really start diving into our mechanical, electrical, door hardware, alerting system, starting to really get into the details. Again, we pause, make sure that we're still on track with an estimate, and then come back through for construction documents. During construction documents, then, we start working on more of the details that aren't so specific to you, but specific to the building. What does your window, your roof edge details look like? What do your window sills look like? How does this go together, and how does it actually function? So at that time, it's less of your input and more just us drawing and figuring out how this works together. After that, then, we would go into bidding and then into construction. So there are 2 different ways that we can consider doing this project in terms of how we would move forward. We could do a phased, or we could do it non-phased. So I'm actually going to talk about non-phased first and then go back to phased. So non-phased is that we would do all of our projects together. We'd do all the design processes together. They would be bid all at the same time, and they would be constructed all together. The pros are that we have economy of scale. So we had one client that said, instead of bringing a semi-truck, I want you to bring a train full of bricks. So you'd have that economy of scale. The other pros would be it's a shorter overall project because we can start them all at the same time and just really condense that, which in turn saves you money, and all of that ends up saving you money. The con is that it's a higher initial cost. If we were to do a phased construction for this process, what we were proposing is that we would have phase 1 would be Station 3, the apparatus support bays, the fire training building, and the police department expansion. Phase 2 then would be the dirty classroom and firing range, and then Station 2. For this, what we're still proposing is that we would still design everything at the same time, But after design, that's when it would break apart. We would bid the two separately. They would construct separately, whether they are kind of overlapping or significantly spread apart. The pros is that we have lower initial costs, but the cons are that it's a higher overall project cost. There's duplications in things like mobilization. So instead of having one concrete crew go around to 5 different projects, we're having them come back and forth and back and forth. And then also, the access to the dirty classroom construction will impact parking. So when we're looking at that overall public safety plan, we had said that police, the firing range and the dirty classroom would be part of phase 2. The challenge that we have there is then you're gonna have a brand new parking lot that you're bringing all of your construction equipment over top of to get to that facility. So perhaps it's more logical just to keep that together with the rest of phase 1. But again, it's ultimately up to you all how you'd like to do it. So if we were to see this visually, this is what we would say, is that we do schematic design together, design development, construction documents, and we bid them all at the same time. If we were to then phase it, we would have, our construction would happen, we'd get completely done with phase 1, then we would bid phase 2, and then completely do phase 2, and we would be, pushing out for another year and a half. If we were to not phase it, we would just tuck that green in with that blue and be done this time next year. So our opinion of probable costs. So what we do is we look at it in terms of a square footage cost. We have a spreadsheet that we keep that has all of the police and fire stations that we have done in the state of Wisconsin and Minnesota that we keep track of, and we base a square footage cost on that. So what we are looking at if we did do it as phased is that we would be at about 37.6 million for that first phase and about 20.6 for that second phase, for a total of 58 million. Breaking it down, so what we wanted to show you here is that, like I said, when we very first looked at that training facility, the programming numbers are a little swayed because originally it was really big. We had it designed much larger. We really wanted to focus in because it was too big of a variable, and we really started diving in and saying, okay, what could you do for future? What could you do later? And we really, really reduced that quite a bit. So you can see the rather large difference there. So essentially, this is what costs have been doing. Like I said, we keep this spreadsheet, which you'll see in a second, and it kind of just tracks all of the different projects that we have bid or are estimated to bid over the last 15 years, actually. So this is where they come from. You can see on the left-hand side where it says if it's bid or an estimate. If it was an estimate, we specifically say if it was done internally, which is MB, or if it was done by an outside agency, such as their CM, or different companies, such as CPMI. It has a station, the size, the bid year, the year of completion, cost of work, dollars per square foot, and then the type of construction it is. There's a lot to read up there. Essentially, what we just know is that there was never a cheaper time to bid than yesterday, so we just keep that in mind. One thing that always comes up whenever we're looking at these emergency services facilities is what are they going to be made of? So we just like to touch base on that real quick. We can do pre-engineered metal buildings, but just like I said in the beginning, we just have to keep in mind that we are required to meet that Category 4 structural requirement. So it can't just be a pole barn. It would have to be a pre-engineered metal building. Things that you can anticipate in the next 25, 30 years is that it will leak. Metal expands and contracts, so because of that, there will be leaking. And you can expect it to be about 20 to 30 years before you have to start really replacing quite a bit, especially the metal panels will start rotting out, or not rotting necessarily, but rusting. There are limited design options, and anytime you start getting fancy, or as Robbie says, anytime it gets cute, it starts adding more cost. So if you're building a rectangle, it's very affordable. If you're building a rectangle with another entry and a lower part and some overhangs and some gutters and a little bit of brick, all those costs just start going up. With conventional masonry, it's you have long-term regular maintenance just like you would in any building type. But specifically for conventional masonry, you'd have to do tuck pointing or replacing the grout in between our bricks. You might have to do a minor brick repair depending on what's happened to the facility over the last 20, 30 years. And you'll definitely need a roof replacement. Every 20, 25 years, you're gonna need a new roof. The major maintenance, though, we would hope that that building would last 50 to 75 years before there's anything structurally that goes wrong with it and have to be a major replacement. Architectural precast has a lot of the same things that masonry has. Again, tuck pointing, replacing of the caulk between the panels. these are sometimes called tip-up panels. Anticipated maintenance for this one is probably closer to that 30 to 50-year mark, just because we really have to make sure we get all that caulking replaced. The challenge that we have between conventional masonry and precast is that precast will get less expensive once we have a lot of panel repetition. So you see it like an Amazon distribution center. They throw those things up, pop, 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 pop. Really affordable way for them because there's a lot of repetition. Fire station design, there's often not a lot of repetition. So we could look at that, for example, for maybe like certain areas of your facility, perhaps like the garage space at the back or the support apparatus space, maybe those could be at a cheaper cost at the precast. Maybe everything else is cheaper at the masonry. We don't know yet. We would do that cost analysis in the next phase of design. So with that, that was a lot, and I don't know what questions you have.
Do we have any questions before we go into closed session on the presentation? Alder Perella.
Yeah, I just, thank you so much. It was very, even fascinating at times because it addressed aspects that I never heard of. I just want to limit to a couple of quick questions for now. So the training facility, is it, the reduction in 13, is the reduction 13 million? What would be the estimate? So you say that the reduction is 13 million, meaning?
Yeah, so what we're looking at here, so in this column on the left-hand side there, what we were initially thinking is that the training facility that we were looking at was much more complex than what we ended up designing it down to. So we had the firing range in there and then the multi-purpose training facility. Again, when we were initially talking to them, what we thought that what we were understanding that they wanted was something a lot bigger, a lot more grand. Then when we actually started talking through, but how are you going to use it? How are you going to train? We started showing them pictures to say, hey, this is what we're understanding you're saying. They're like, oh, no, this is more what we want. That's when we were able to reduce it down. We were able to combine the firing range with a classroom space to get to that 11.4 million for that top number. The props, again, there are a lot of training props that fire departments can have. So what we were saying is that depending on what training props you have, it can be 5 to 6 million easily. However, we determined with the departments that they might not need those all right away. Those could be things that they could phase in. They are smaller training props, such as collapsed trench drain, like that's something that they could do in the future very easily. So we were able to take that out. The fire training facility, the 4.6 million, was more thinking that it would be on its own site and we'd have to bring water and electricity and gas and all those things to it. But when we decided it's actually going on this site with the rest of your facilities, we're able to take some of that site development cost and you work it in with Station 3, which brought that cost down. And then site accessories, we just didn't know enough yet, so we had assigned a number to it. Again, we don't really know how many more accessories we need. What we think that we've designed at that 13.1 is appropriate for your community of your size and for your training needs.
So 13 million would be what you predict. It's not what has been reduced, it's what you predict. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay. And then I just assume that the classic traditional masonry is the most expensive. How did you make a cost prediction without making a difference between the 3 different types?
Yeah, so what we would do is we have partners in the industry that we can reach out to and see what would go into it. So for pre-engineered metal building, we work with pre-engineered metal building manufacturers all the time, so we can have them kind of talk it through to us. The biggest cost there is anytime you do anything that's not a rectangle, there will be costs that go up. So they can kind of give us a range for that. Masonry, the majority of our facilities end up being masonry, so we know those numbers really well. When it comes to precast, there are so many factors that are out of our control. For example, how far away is the local precast manufacturer? What kind of panels are we doing? Are they just raked? Do they have brick? And then the repetition, like I mentioned, Amazon, they can pop those up, build it for really cheap. Depending on how we design your facility and how much repetition there could be, it would have a really big sway. So what we would do is we would reach out to a precast manufacturer and have them help us with that cost. They wouldn't know anything that's on the inside, but we can help them with that part, and then we can make sure that we figure out where we're at. And that would be something that we would do right away in that schematic design phase.
I'm so sorry, I should have been more clear. What I meant is, for example, for the just as an example, for the training facility, you said the cost would be about 13 million.
Yes. Yeah.
So is that, do you envision 13 million for a conventional masonry, for a pre-engineered, or an architectural precast? So,
Yeah, so right now we priced it between conventional masonry and architectural precast.
so you made an average between
Yep,
those?
yep.
Okay, very good,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Alder Boris.
Thank you, Chair. The reductions that are projected, could you go back to that slide?
Reductions that are projected.
So the reduction amount is the reduction from the 32 to 40 million, correct?
Yeah, this was just for that, for those couple of facilities, yes. Yep, from the 32 to the 13, yes.
Okay, so the projection is not the 13 million, that is the reduction from the original
No,
projection?
that is the anticipated cost for those two facilities, is the 13.1 million.
Okay, okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yep.
And then on the phased costs that you displayed on the projections,
This one?
so that's for the phased, but if it were to run concurrent, then
Yeah.
you said that there would be, the pro side of that would be that there should be cost reductions. Is there a projection of what concurrent would be?
Yeah, and I can look back in the report, I think it was right around 2 or 3 million would be saved if we were to put it all together at one time. When we were looking at this and when we were doing our estimating, we were actually kind of surprised that it wouldn't be a little bit larger, but so much of your work in the larger projects are all in that first phase that really helped us make sure that we kind of mitigated that increase down. I think if I recall correctly, it was about 2 million.
Okay, thank
2
you.
or 3, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
I just want to point out too, right now we're at that napkin sketch
Yeah.
side of things, right? It's bubble diagrams in the end and we're working off of. These numbers are conservative, right? We want to come down from here, right? So when you get into schematic design and various other things, we get more details. These estimates get stronger as we draw more, as we do more work. Estimates get stronger, they get tighter. We report back to you and say, hey, the price is this now. And then you tell us to move forward to the next phase, right? So this is the first stab at it, right? And so we want to make sure we're not coming back here later on saying it's $70 million. So we've got contingencies on here and various inflation deals, and so on and so forth to make sure we're covered should that happen. And then in these next phases, we really kind of tighten things up as we move forward too.
Yeah, and I should also mention that when I said 2 million or 2 to 3 million, that was phasing out for 1 year. So if we were to continue, if you were to say like phase 2 is 5 years down the road, we would have to start increasing that number significantly. We just did another estimate for a client that wanted it 3 years out and 5 years out, and we were averaging about 13% increase for 3 years out and 24% increase for 5 years out.
And the real-time data we're using too, you saw on that graph, we had Harrison and Union Grove, we just bid those in the last month.
Yeah.
Right, so we're using real data that we're getting these projects from and saying, okay, the good news is it flattened off.
Yeah.
It's not going like this anymore, but if you kind of don't do the phased approach, who knows what happens in 2 years, and all of a sudden we have another one of those events that everything takes off again, right? So that's kind of why we did the phase 1, phase 2, so you all can kind of see if you stretch it out, no one has a crystal ball, who knows what happens in the end.
Administrator Bradley.
Yep, and I don't know if you guys recall, but when we awarded this contract to Wendell and Five Bugles, the intent was at each phase, you guys review it and you make a decision if we move forward into the next phase. So the question tonight after closed session, the resolution is simply to move into the next phase. It's not making a decision that you're building this. It's not making the decision if you're gonna do 2 phases, if you're gonna do 1 phase. We definitely have to get to the point of design development before you really make that informed decision. This is just making sure that through this process, everybody's happy or content with what's designed, what's laid out. The materials will get vetted out between schematic and design development. We'll really refine that process. There's gonna be other questions, are we looking at solar? Are we looking at geothermal? All of that stuff will happen through the process. So we do an evaluation, and that'll happen from the engineers and consultants that are brought in. They'll do those analysis if those things are financially viable in the project. What do they look like? Because that's gonna affect materials, that's gonna affect design. So as we go through this process, that's where all that'll take place. It's simply, keeping everybody up to date. So if this is still the direction you want to go, then we move to the next step. If not, we make whatever changes need to happen.
All right. That being said, I would entertain a motion. Alder LaFave.
Okay, I move to convene in closed session under the exemption contained in Wisconsin State Statutes S19851D for the purpose of considering strategy for crime prevention, to wit, reviewing and discussing preliminary plans for the public safety complex.
All in favor of going into closed session, state aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All right, we will reconvene in open. All righty, we're going to reconvene in open session. I'd like to thank Wendell 5 Bugles Design for their presentation in open and closed session. But with that being said, we will move on to item number 11, resolution number 78-25-26 by Alderpersons Rust and LaFave, approving the concept study for the Sheboygan Public Safety Complex by Wendell Company 5 Bugles Design. Yes. Second. All in favor? Aye. Chair votes aye. That is approved. Oh. Attorney Majerus.
We had simultaneous seconds. Who's taking the pleasure? Okay.
All right. Our next meeting date will be August 25th, 2025. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Chair votes aye. We are adjourned at 8:27. Thank you, everybody.